At 23,000 feet over Germany, a B-17 flying fortress was being hunted behind it. 12 German Bf-109 fighters were lining up for the kill.
Inside the tail gun position, Staff Sergeant Michael Donovan watched them close in. Training said he should wait. The manual said he should conserve ammunition.
Every gunner before him had been taught the same thing. Let the fighters commit. Let them come into range, then fire defensively. But Donovan had seen what happened when gunners waited.
Waiting gave the enemy the first move. Waiting let German pilots choose the angle. Waiting turned the most dangerous seat on the bomber into a coffin. So Donovan did something that sounded insane.
He did not wait for the attack. He attacked first, before the German fighters were ready, before they entered the perfect range, before they could coordinate their assault. He opened fire, and in the next few minutes, the sky over Germany changed. German fighters scattered. Attack formations collapsed. Pilots who expected an easy bomber kill suddenly found themselves under fire before they could even begin their run. By the time it was over, Donovan's tail guns had become the most feared weapon on that bomber. This is the story of the B-17 tail gunner who refused to play defense, the man who turned survival into aggression, and the forgotten tactic that made German fighters hesitate before attacking American bombers.
Michael Donovan did not grow up as the kind of man who waited for trouble. He came from South Boston, a place where hesitation could get you hurt. His father worked hard.
His neighborhood was rough, and Donovan learned early that if danger was coming, you did not stand still and hope it missed. You moved first. You hit first. You made the other man react to you.
That lesson followed him into the Army Air Forces. When Donovan enlisted, the military did not immediately see him as a perfect gunner. He was too aggressive, too impatient.
Too willing to expose himself. In gunnery school, instructors tried to teach discipline. They told him to wait for the right range, wait for the correct angle.
Wait for the target to enter the firing zone. Donovan listened, but he did not fully agree. To him, the problem was simple. A dead gunner could not protect anyone.
A gunner who waited too long was already halfway dead. He believed speed mattered. Not just accuracy, speed, reaction, pressure. The first burst might not destroy the enemy.
But it could break his confidence. It could force him to move. It could ruin his attack. That idea would later become the heart of Donovan's entire method.
But at the time, most people thought he was reckless, maybe even suicidal, and when he arrived in England, he was assigned to one of the most dangerous positions in the air war.
Tail gunner on a B-17 flying fortress. The B-17 looked powerful from the outside. 4 engines, heavy guns, thick formation flying, a machine built to punch deep into enemy territory and come back alive.
But inside the aircraft, every man knew the truth. A bomber was never safe. German fighters came from above, from below, from the sides, from the front, and from the rear.
The tail gunner sat at the very back of the aircraft, cramped, exposed, often alone with only the sound of engines, wind, and radio calls. He was the last line of defense against fighters attacking from 6 o'clock.
If a German pilot got behind the bomber, the tail gunner had seconds to stop him, miss the shot, and the entire crew could die. The standard doctrine was defensive, watch, trank.
Conserve ammunition. Fire when the enemy enters effective range. Do not waste rounds. Do not panic. Do not shoot too early. That made sense on paper, but Donovan believed the paper was missing something.
German fighter pilots were not stupid. They knew how American bombers defended themselves. They knew where the guns were. They knew when gunners usually opened fire. They knew how to draw fire from one gun position while another fighter exploited the blind moment. They were not simply attacking aircraft. They were attacking the crew's timing.
And Donovan hated giving the enemy control over timing. To him, the answer was not to wait for the German plan to unfold. The answer was to break the plan before it began.
When Donovan joined the crew of a B-17 known as Hell's Fury, the aircraft already had a reputation. It had survived previous missions, but barely German fighters had torn into it before. The old tail gunner had survived, but he wanted out. To him, the tail position felt cursed. The next man to sit there, he believed, would not make it. Donovan volunteered anyway.
The pilot, Captain James Whitmore, wanted to know if Donovan understood the odds. Tail gunners had one of the worst jobs in bomber warfare.
They faced repeated attacks from some of the best fighter pilots in the world. They were often the first to see death coming directly at them, but Donovan did not seem frightened.
He did not talk about luck. He talked about action. He told Whitmore he did not plan to wait for German fighters to shoot first. Whitmore studied him, then accepted him.
Maybe because he thought Donovan was crazy. Maybe because crazy was exactly what Hell's Fury needed. On his first missions, Donovan showed the crew something they had not seen before.
He fired early, very early, at ranges where most gunners would still be waiting. He sent tracer rounds toward German fighters while they were still forming up.
The shots were not always meant to kill. They were meant to disturb, to disrupt, to make German pilots break formation before their attack was organized. Other gunners saw wasted ammunition.
Donovan saw prevention. One short burst at long range might cost a few rounds. But if it forced a fighter to break off, it might save a bomber. And a bomber carried 9 or 10 men. To Donovan, that was not waste. That was math. On another mission, Donovan noticed something important. German fighters often attacked in groups. One fighter drew attention.
Another used the distraction. The lead aircraft looked like the obvious danger, so most gunners focused on it. But Donovan began watching the wingmen. They were often more predictable.
They held formation. They expected the gunner to track the lead fighter. They were not ready to become the first target, so Donovan changed the script.
Instead of firing at the lead aircraft, he fired at the wingman. The result was immediate. The wingman was hit. The lead fighter suddenly found himself alone. The formation broke.
The attack collapsed. That moment confirmed what Donovan had already believed. A bomber gunner did not always need to destroy every enemy aircraft.
Sometimes he only needed to destroy the enemy's plan. German pilots were trained to attack with timing and coordination, break the timing, and the attack became weaker.
Break the coordination, and the fighters became isolated. Isolated fighters became easier to scare, easier to hit, easier to force away. Donovan began studying German attacks like a street fighter, studying an opponent's shoulders. Where did they form? Who moved first? Who followed? When were they most vulnerable?
Not during the final attack, before it, during the setup. That was the moment no one was shooting at them. That was the moment Donovan wanted. On March 6, 1944, Hell's Fury was sent deep into Germany.
The mission was dangerous. The bomber stream expected heavy fighter resistance. Everyone knew the Luftwaffe would come. During the briefing, Captain Whitmore warned the crew.
This one would be rough. Stay sharp. Stay alive. Donovan asked permission to try something different. Aggressive fire, not defensive fire.
He wanted to engage German fighters before they committed to their attack runs. He wanted to force them to defend before they could attack. Whitmore was cautious. The concern was obvious. A tail gunner had limited ammunition. If Donovan burned through it too early, the bomber could be defenseless later. But Donovan argued that the old way was already killing men.
They had spent years waiting for German fighters to attack, and the casualty rates told the story. Maybe it was time to stop waiting. Whitmore finally gave him one mission to prove it.
If Donovan's method failed, he would be pulled off the gun. Donovan accepted. Then Hell's Fury lifted into the morning sky. It climbed with the formation, crossed the channel.
Entered hostile airspace. For a while the routine felt normal. Engines droning, radio chatter, cold air clouds below. Then the call came. Fighters, 6 o'clock high.
12 German Bf-109s. They were still far out, still forming, still preparing. Standard doctrine said wait. Donovan did not wait. He turned the twin .50 caliber guns toward them.
And opened fire. At that distance, most of the rounds missed. The tracers cut through the empty air. To a traditional instructor, it would have looked foolish.
But Donovan was not aiming for one plane. He was aiming for the formation. The effect came fast. The German fighters scattered. The lead aircraft broke. Wingmen hesitated.
The attack pattern fell apart before it could begin. Whitmore came over the intercom, warning him about ammunition. Donovan told him to watch. What happened next? The Germans regrouped.
But they were different now, less aggressive, more cautious. They approached again, but not with the same confidence. The initiative had shifted. They were no longer executing a clean attack.
They were reacting to the gunner in the tail. That was exactly what Donovan wanted. He tracked the new lead fighter, then fired again. Shorter bursts this time, not panic fire.
Controlled pressure. Again, the formation wavered, but one German pilot kept coming. Experienced, disciplined, not easily frightened, Donovan let him close, closer than before.
He waited as the fighter grew larger in his sights. Then he fired a heavy sustained burst. The stream of bullets met the Bf-109 in its attack path. The German pilot tried to break away too late.
The fighter erupted and fell. The first kill was confirmed, but Donovan did not celebrate. Celebration wastes attention, and more fighters were coming.
The remaining German aircraft split their attack. Some came from directly behind, others came from the rear quarter. They were trying to divide the bomber's defensive fire.
That was the standard counter to an aggressive gunner. Make him look everywhere, make him panic, make him split his attention. Donovan refused. He focused on his sector.
He trusted the waist gunners to handle their side. He would hold 6 o'clock. 6 fighters came toward the tail. He picked the lead aircraft, fired. The fighter went down.
Then he shifted to the next, fired again. Another aircraft fell. In seconds, the German attack dissolved. What had begun as a coordinated assault had become a retreat.
German fighters were breaking away from a single tail gun position. That alone was shocking, but the mission was far from over. Hell's Fury still had to reach the target.
Still had to drop its bombs. Still had to fly home. And Donovan had already used a frightening amount of ammunition. That was the danger of his method. Aggression could save the aircraft.
But only if the ammunition lasted long enough, and the Luftwaffe was not finished. Minutes later, more German fighters appeared. This time, the attack was larger, more aggressive.
better coordinated. They had seen what happened to the first group. Now they tried to overwhelm the bomber from multiple angles. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock.
A storm of fighters closing from the rear. A defensive gunner would try to cover everything. A defensive gunner would divide fire. A defensive gunner would hope the overlapping guns could hold.
Donovan chose another path. He ignored the distractions. He focused on the most dangerous direct stern attack, the fighters coming straight at the tail.
He knew that if those aircraft got a clean firing run, Hell's Fury could be ripped apart, so he aimed at the center of the threat. The lead BF-109 came in fast. Closing speed was brutal.
The time window was tiny. Donovan had only seconds. He fired. The tracers walked into the German fighter's path. At first, the pilot held course. He had to. Braking too early would ruin the attack. But holding course meant flying into Donovan's guns. The rounds found him. The fighter rolled over and fell. Donovan shifted immediately. No time to think. No time to track perfectly.
He aimed where the next aircraft would be, not where it was. He fired. Another fighter flew into the stream. Another explosion. The remaining fighters broke.
Again, the tail gun had turned defense into offense, but now Donovan was nearly out of ammunition. And the worst attack was still coming. The German fighters pulled back and began shadowing the bomber.
That was not a retreat, that was preparation. Whitmore understood what it meant. They were calling in more fighters. Hell's Fury had drifted away from the main formation during the fight.
The nearest friendly bomber was miles away. No escort fighters were close enough to help. For a few terrible minutes, Hell's Fury was alone in German sky. Then the new contacts appeared. More fighters, dozens of them. German aircraft began forming for a coordinated assault. The numbers were impossible. No single bomber was supposed to survive that kind of attention.
Donovan checked his ammunition. Not enough, not even close. A few hundred rounds against dozens of fighters. The math said they would die. So Donovan decided to change the equation.
He asked permission to attack. Not wait, not defend, attack. Whitmore asked for an explanation. Donovan's answer was simple. If the Germans were allowed to finish forming, they would hit Hell's Fury from every angle.
The bomber could not defend against that. But if Donovan fired while they were still organizing, he might break the assault before it started. He might scatter them. He might buy time.
Whitmore gave the order, do it. Donovan did not waste a second. He opened fire into the center of the forming attack, not at one aircraft, at the place where coordination lived.
The place where fighters held formation, the place where confidence became a plan. His guns hammered, the tracers cut into the German formation. One fighter caught fire.
2 others collided while trying to evade. The entire attack dissolved into chaos. Dozens of fighters scattered in every direction. One tail gunner had shattered a coordinated assault before it began.
But Donovan knew the truth. He had not won. He had bought time. And he was almost dry. The Germans regrouped faster than expected. This time, they abandoned careful tactics.
They swarmed. Fighters came in aggressively, trying to overwhelm the bomber through sheer force. Donovan picked targets with brutal focus, not the closest aircraft.
Not always the loudest threat. He aimed at the middle of the swarm, the psychological center, the place that held the attack together. Short bursts, shift, short burst, shift.
German fighters took hits. Some broke away, some fell, others kept coming. Cannon rounds tore past the tail. Some hit the bomber. Metal screamed, the aircraft shook. But Donovan stayed on the guns. He was not calm because he had no fear. He was calm because fear no longer mattered. There was only target. Burst. Burst.
The fighters closed to terrifying range, close enough that Donovan could see them clearly. Close enough that every second felt final. He fired again. Another fighter fell.
Then another. Then his guns clicked empty. No more rounds. Donovan was dry. The most dangerous tail gun in the sky had no ammunition left. He called it over the intercom, no bullets.
No tail defense. Hell's Fury was still flying. The crew was still alive. But the German fighters saw their chance. They regrouped for one final attack.
The remaining fighters came in from directly behind. Slow, careful, methodical. They knew the tail guns had gone silent. They believed the bomber was defenseless. And maybe it was.
But Donovan had one weapon left, fear. He turned the empty guns toward the lead fighter, tracked him perfectly. Barrels aligned with the cockpit. The German pilot saw the twin .50s following him.
He knew what that tail gun had already done. He knew how many fighters had fallen. He knew what happened to pilots who flew straight into Donovan's sights. The guns were empty.
But the German pilot did not know that. And instinct is stronger than intelligence. When weapons are pointed at you, you move. The lead fighter broke away. The others followed.
The attack collapsed. Not because Donovan could fire, but because they believed he could. His reputation had become ammunition. Empty guns became a threat. The Germans did not return.
They had lost too many aircraft attacking one bomber. The cost was too high. Hell's Fury continued to the target, dropped its bombs, and flew home. When the bomber landed, the ground crew counted the damage.
Bullet holes, cannon strikes, damaged systems, a cracked rudder, but the aircraft had survived, the crew had survived, and Donovan had fired every round loaded into his position.
Every single bullet. When the final tally came in, the story spread across the bomber group. Donovan had destroyed multiple German fighters in one mission.
The exact claims varied depending on who counted, who saw, and what was confirmed, but everyone agreed on the most important thing. His method had worked. He had not survived by waiting.
He had survived by taking the initiative away from the enemy. By morning, other tail gunners wanted to know how he did it. By afternoon, officers were asking questions.
By evening, higher command wanted a full explanation. Donovan described the idea simply. Do not let the enemy control the attack. Fire before they are ready.
Break formations during the setup phase. Use early fire to create fear. Use fear to create hesitation. Use hesitation to survive. This was not just shooting, it was psychological warfare.
Donovan understood something that many manuals ignored. A fighter pilot is not a machine. He is a man, and men can be intimidated. Men can lose confidence.
Men can break off an attack before the first bullet hits them. If you make them believe the cost will be too high, they may choose another target. That was the heart of Donovan's method.
Aggressive defense, a strange phrase, but in the bomber war it made sense. Do not hide behind the guns, use them. Do not wait for death to choose the angle. Force death to change course.
Soon, Donovan was pulled from combat and ordered to train other gunners. He did not want to leave his crew, but the logic was unavoidable. One crew had survived because of what he knew.
Many more might survive if he taught it. So Donovan began training tail gunners to think differently. They were not just passengers at the back of the bomber.
They were not just the last line of defense. They could shape the fight. They could attack the attack. He taught them to fire early when it mattered, to aim at formations, not only aircraft.
To target wingmen, not always leaders, to concentrate fire rather than panic across every angle, to understand that ammunition spent preventing an attack could be more
valuable than ammunition saved for a desperate last second. Most importantly, he taught them to act first, not blindly, not recklessly, but decisively. Some men could not do it.
They were too cautious, too trained by survival instinct to wait, too afraid of wasting ammunition. They washed out. Others understood immediately.
They had been waiting for someone to say what they already felt. That defense alone was not enough, that German fighters had to be made afraid, that survival sometimes required aggression.
Those men carried Donovan's lessons into the sky, and German pilots began to notice. As aggressive gunnery spread, German attacks became less certain.
Direct stern approaches became more dangerous. Fighters that once came in clean and confident now found themselves under fire before they were ready. Formations broke earlier.
Some pilots hesitated, some chose different angles, some avoided specific bombers altogether. That was the real victory, not just the fighters shot down, the attacks that never happened.
The passes that were abandoned, the bombers that made it home because the enemy decided the cost was too high. In war, fear is a weapon. Donovan had used it from the tail of a bomber.
But like many men who changed things in war, he did not become famous. After the war, he went home. He worked. He lived quietly. He did not spend his life telling everyone he had rewritten aerial combat.
He did not chase interviews. He did not build a legend around himself. To him, he had done what needed doing. That was all. But the men who trained under him remembered.
The crews who made it home remembered. The gunners who learned to stop waiting remembered. They understood what he had given them. Not just a tactic, a way to think, a way to survive.
Before Donovan, many gunners believed survival meant staying small, conserving ammunition, reacting carefully. After Donovan, they understood something different.
Survival could mean becoming the reason the enemy hesitated, and hesitation in combat can be fatal. Michael Donovan's story matters because it challenges the way we think about defense. Most people believe defense means waiting, holding, reacting, enduring. But Donovan proved that sometimes the best defense is to steal the enemy's confidence before he strikes.
He did not have armor. He did not have speed. He did not control the bomber. He sat in the tail, facing the fighters that wanted to kill him. But he controlled one thing, the moment he opened fire.
And that was enough to change everything. A single gunner could not win the air war alone. No one could. The bomber campaign was won by thousands of crews, mechanics, pilots, navigators, engineers, escorts, and ground crews. But inside that massive machine of war, there were moments when one man's decision mattered. March 6th, 1944 was one of those moments.
The manuals said wait, the instructors said conserve, common sense said stay alive. Donovan answered with action. He fired first. He forced German pilots to react.
He turned empty sky into a wall of tracers, and he showed every gunner who came after him that fear did not have to belong only to the men inside the bomber. It could belong to the attackers too.
Most people have never heard the name Michael Donovan. They know the B-17, they know the 8th Air Force, they know the bomber war over Europe. But they do not know the man in the tail who decided that waiting was a death sentence. They do not know the gunner who turned defense into offense.
They do not know the aggressive tactic that made German fighters think twice before attacking from behind. That is why stories like this deserve to be told. Because history is not only made in command rooms, it is not only made by generals. Sometimes history is made in a freezing tail compartment at 23,000 feet by one man.
2 machine guns and 1 decision to shoot before the enemy was ready. Mad Mike Donovan refused to wait for death to come to him. He made the enemy feel hunted first.
And in the sky over Germany, that changed everything. If this story deserves to be remembered, hit the like button, subscribe, for more forgotten World War II stories.
Because the men who changed the war are not always the ones standing in the spotlight. Sometimes they are alone in the tail of a bomber, watching fighters close in, finger on the trigger, waiting for the exact moment to turn fear around.